Captain Doyen stared at the screen in front of him. The image showed something that should not exist. A massive structure floated in the darkness of space, shaped like a pyramid but made of a material that seemed to swallow light itself. It was black, but not the normal black of space. This was a different kind of darkness, one that made his eyes hurt if he looked at it too long. "How big is it?" he asked. Hyejin, his language officer, checked her readings. "About 5 kilometers on each side, sir." "But that doesn't make sense. Our sensors say there's nothing there, but we can see it with our own eyes." Doyen nodded. He had heard the stories about this place. Everyone in the galaxy had heard the stories. The Void Sector, the place where ships went to disappear. 17 different alien species had sent expeditions here over the past 1,000 years. None of them ever came back. The humans called it the Tomb. Nobody knew who built it or why. It had been here longer than any living civilization could remember. Some said it was 3 million years old. Others said it was older than that. Jiwon, the first officer, walked up beside Doyen. His face was pale. "Captain, we should leave. The Galactic Council made it illegal to come here. If they find out we're here, they'll kick humanity out of the Council completely." "The Council refused to help us," Doyen said quietly. 2 billion humans are dead from the withering plague. 2 billion, and the Council said we're too young, too aggressive, too immature to deserve their help. He turned to face his crew. There were 47 people on the ship, and every single one of them had volunteered for this mission. They all knew they might not come back. They all knew the Council would call them criminals. But they also all knew someone who had died from the plague. A parent, a child, a friend, a lover. The withering plague didn't care who you were. It just killed you slowly, painfully over the course of months. The tomb is supposed to contain knowledge from the precursors, Doyen continued. The species that came before everyone else. If there's a cure for the withering anywhere in the galaxy, it's in there. Hyejin pulled up a new image on the screen. It showed the entrance to the tomb. Strange symbols glowed around it, written in a language that predated all known civilizations. But the ship's computer had been working on translating them for the past 3 hours. "Translation is complete," Hyejin said. Her voice shook slightly as she read the words. "Only the dead may enter. The living shall become ash. Turn back, children of flesh." The bridge fell silent. Everyone stared at the words. "What does that mean?" asked Minji, the ship's doctor. "Only the dead may enter?" "It means what it says," Juwon replied. "The Vexari Empire sent 3 warships here 50 years ago. The best warriors in their entire species. When they tried to enter the tomb, they all burned to ash. Every single one of them. The Crystalline Collective tried next. They're beings made of living crystal, incredibly intelligent. They sent their greatest minds. Same result, ash. What about the eternal consciousness?" someone asked from the back of the bridge. "They uploaded themselves into robot bodies," Hyejin said. "Thought they could trick the tomb by not being biological anymore. Didn't work. The robots just stopped functioning the moment they crossed the threshold." Doyen walked closer to the screen, studying the tomb. The warning repeated itself over and over around the entrance in different languages, different scripts. All of them said the same thing. "Only the dead may enter." "I'm going in," he said. "Captain, no," Jiwon started. "That's an order." Doyen's voice was firm but not unkind. "If something goes wrong, you take the ship back to Earth. You tell them everything we found here." "Understood." Jiwon looked like he wanted to argue, but he nodded. "Understood, sir." Doyen headed toward the shuttle bay. Hyejin caught up with him in the corridor. "Sir, wait. The translation might not be completely accurate. When it says only the dead may enter, it could mean many things. Spiritually dead, emotionally dead, metaphorically dead, or literally dead," Doyen finished for her. He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I know what it means, Hyejin. How could you possibly know?" Doyen paused at the shuttle bay door. 7 years ago, I was stationed at Titan Colony. You heard about the disaster there?" Hyejin nodded slowly. Everyone had heard about Titan Colony. An accident with the life support systems. Explosive decompression. 147 people had died. Only 12 survived. I was one of the 12, Doyen said. But I didn't survive the explosion. I died in the void. My heart stopped. My brain stopped. The cold hit me so fast that I froze solid within seconds. I was dead for 7 minutes before the rescue team found me and brought me back to the ship. 7 minutes? Hyejin's eyes widened. That's impossible. Brain death occurs after 4 minutes without oxygen. I know, but they managed to revive me anyway. Took 3 months of rehabilitation before I could walk again. Another 6 months of therapy before I could return to duty. He looked at her directly. So when the tomb says only the dead may enter, I think I qualify. I've been dead before, and I came back. The shuttle bay was cold and quiet. Doyen climbed into the small transport shuttle and began the launch sequence. Through the window, he could see members of his crew watching from the observation deck. He gave them a small wave, then sealed the hatch. The shuttle detached from the main ship with a soft hiss. Doyen took manual control of the flight systems. He didn't trust the computer to navigate near something that had destroyed so many ships before. As he got closer to the tomb, he noticed something strange. The symbols around the entrance were starting to glow brighter. They pulsed with a rhythm that reminded him of a heartbeat. Slow, steady, ancient. "Captain," Hyejin's voice crackled over the radio. "We're detecting massive energy readings from the tomb. It's like the whole structure is waking up." "I see it," Doyen replied. His hands were steady on the controls, but his heart was racing. The entrance to the tomb was a perfect triangle of absolute darkness. As his shuttle approached, more symbols began to appear across the entire surface of the structure. They wrote themselves in spiraling patterns, each one flashing into existence with a burst of light. "Captain, I'm getting a new translation," Hyejin said urgently. "The symbols are asking you a question." "What question?" "It says, have you known the true death? Have you crossed the boundary and returned? Have you felt the nothing and chosen to be something again?" Doyen's breath caught in his throat. The memory came flooding back. The feeling of dying in the cold void of space. The way everything had simply stopped. No pain, no fear, just nothing. An absolute nothing that was more terrifying than anything he had ever experienced. And then the slow, agonizing process of coming back, of choosing to live again. He opened a communication channel, somehow knowing that the tomb could hear him. "Yes, I died 7 years ago in the void. My heart stopped beating. My brain ceased all activity. For 7 minutes I was gone. Completely gone. And then I chose to come back. I came back to live. The symbols pulsed once, twice, 3 times. Then they began to spin faster and faster, creating a circle of brilliant light around the entrance." "Captain, the energy readings just went off the scale." Jiwon's voice cut off suddenly. The entrance flared with light so bright that Doyen had to close his eyes. He felt the shuttle being pulled forward, not violently but gently, like a hand guiding him home. When he opened his eyes again, he was inside the tomb, and everything he thought he knew about the universe changed forever. Doyen woke up slowly. His head felt heavy and his body ached like he had been sleeping for days. He opened his eyes and saw that his shuttle had landed on a floor made of black glass. The surface was perfectly smooth like a mirror, but it reflected nothing. Not even his own face. He checked his suit systems. Everything seemed normal. The air outside was breathable, which shouldn't be possible. The temperature was exactly 20 degrees Celsius, perfect for humans. The gravity felt exactly like Earth's gravity. It was as if the tomb had adjusted itself specifically for him. Doyen opened the shuttle hatch and stepped out carefully. His boots made no sound when they touched the glass floor. The silence was complete, more absolute than the vacuum of space. He could hear his own heartbeat, his own breathing, but nothing else. The tomb's interior stretched out in every direction, impossibly large. From the outside, the tomb had been 5 kilometers wide, but this space was much, much bigger. It defied all laws of physics. The ceiling was so far above him that he couldn't see it. The walls were so far away that they disappeared into darkness. In the distance, Doyen could see pillars of light. They rose from the floor like frozen flames, illuminating what looked like a massive library. But instead of books or data storage devices, there were pods, thousands of them, maybe millions. They stretched into the distance as far as he could see, row after row of transparent containers. "Hello?" Doyen called out. His voice should have echoed in such a large space, but instead it was swallowed by the silence. For a moment nothing happened. Then something changed. It wasn't a sound or a sight. It was more like a feeling, a presence that suddenly made itself known. A thought formed in Doyen's mind, clear and distinct as if someone had spoken directly into his brain. "You bear the mark of crossing. You have walked in the shadow and returned. You are permitted to proceed, child of Earth." Doyen's hand went to his sidearm instinctively, but he didn't draw it. Whatever was speaking to him didn't feel hostile. It felt ancient, patient, and impossibly vast. "Who are you?" he asked. "We are the archive of the precursors. We are the memory of those who achieved transcendence. We are the keepers of the gift and the warning. The precursors? You're the ones who built this tomb. We built many tombs, scattered across the galaxy, each one different, each one a test, each one a treasure. You are the first human to pass the test, the first of your species to enter this place. One of the light pillars grew brighter as if inviting him forward. Doyen walked toward it, his scientific mind trying to catalog everything he saw. As he passed the pods, he could see figures inside them. Aliens of species he had never encountered before. Some looked like they were sleeping. Others looked like they were dead. Still others looked like something in between. "What are these pods?" he asked. "Records, memories, the essence of those who came before. Every species that has entered this tomb has left their mark, their knowledge, their experiences, their mistakes." Doyen reached the light pillar. At its center floated a sphere about the size of a basketball. It was made of swirling data, not holographic but somehow solid, like pure information given physical form. Colors moved through it in patterns that hurt to look at directly. "You seek the cure to the withering plague," the voice stated. It wasn't a question. "Yes, my people are dying. Billions of them. We need help. The withering is not a disease. It is a test." Doyen felt his blood run cold. "What do you mean, a test? People are dying. Children are dying. How is that a test? The withering is our final gift to the living universe. Every species that achieves space travel encounters it eventually. It is not random. It is not natural. It is selection. Selection for what?" Doyen's voice was harsh now, angry. "Selection for who gets to live and who gets to die. Selection for those who have learned the value of life by experiencing death. Selection for those who can make the choice your species made. The choice to risk everything for knowledge. To face the impossible. To die and return." The sphere expanded, and suddenly Doyen could see things. Visions, memories, records of the past. He saw the Vexari warriors approaching the tomb. They were proud, strong, and fearless. They had never known true defeat. They had never experienced real death. When they tried to enter the tomb, they burned to ash instantly because none of them had ever died and been brought back. He saw the crystalline collective, beings of pure thought housed in living crystal bodies. They were immortal by nature, never knowing death at all. When they tried to enter, the tomb simply rejected them. They couldn't pass the test because they had never faced what the test required. He saw the eternal consciousness. Beings who had uploaded their minds to machines to escape death entirely. They thought they could trick the tomb, but the tomb saw through their deception. They had run from death rather than accepting it and overcoming it. "Only the dead may enter," Doyen whispered. "Not the immortal. Not the undying. Only those who have died and come back. Only those who know death intimately. Your species is rare. You preserve the dying. You revive the dead with your medicines and machines. You refuse to accept mortality's finality. This makes you dangerous. This makes you worthy. This makes you ready." The sphere descended slowly until it was floating right in front of Doyen. He reached out and touched it. It was warm, pulsing with a rhythm like a heartbeat. "The cure lies within," the voice continued. But also the warning. Death is the teacher. To eliminate death entirely is to eliminate growth. To cure the withering, you must accept that some things are worth dying for, and some things are worth living for despite death. Doyen wrapped his hands around the sphere. Information flooded into his mind. Not all at once, but in a steady stream. He saw the structure of the withering plague, how it worked, why it existed. He saw the cure, elegant and simple once you understood the underlying mechanism. He saw the production process, the distribution methods, the timeline for saving his species. But he also saw the warning. The reason the precursors had created the withering in the first place. "You achieved immortality," Doyen said slowly, understanding dawning. "You eliminated death completely, and it destroyed you. We became static, unchanging. Without death, there was no urgency. Without loss, there was no appreciation. Without ending, there was no meaning. We existed for millions of years, perfect and eternal, and we became empty, hollow. We were alive, but we were not living. So you created the withering to prevent other species from making the same mistake. We created the withering to teach, to select, to guide. Species that cure it without understanding its lesson will follow our path to extinction. Species that understand the lesson will thrive." Doyen held the sphere close to his chest. He could feel its warmth spreading through his suit, through his body. "What happened to you? To the precursors? We transcended, left physical form behind, became something else. But we left these tombs as our legacy, our warning, our hope that others would learn from our mistakes. Are you still here?
Still watching?
We are everywhere and nowhere. We exist beyond your understanding of existence. But yes, in a way, we are still here. We wait, we watch. We hope. The light pillar began to fade. Doyen knew his time in this place was coming to an end. He had what he came for. The cure, the knowledge. But he also had something more. A responsibility, a burden. I won't let humanity make your mistake, he said. We'll cure the withering. But we'll remember why we had to cure it. We'll remember that death gives life meaning. That is why you were chosen, Doyen. Not just because you died and returned, but because you understand, you carry the wisdom of both life and death within you. The sphere in his hands began to glow brighter. Doyen turned and walked back toward his shuttle. The pods around him seemed to pulse with light as he passed, as if acknowledging his presence. He climbed into the shuttle and sealed the hatch. When he looked back, the tomb's interior was already fading. The impossible space was shrinking, returning to normal dimensions. Within moments, he was floating in space again, his shuttle just outside the tomb's entrance. "Captain!" Jiwan's voice burst through the radio. "Captain, are you alive? We lost all contact with you. You've been gone for 43 hours. Doyen looked at his chronometer. It had felt like maybe an hour inside. But time worked differently in that place. "I'm alive," he said. "And I have what we need. Prepare the medical bay. We have work to do." The medical bay was crowded. Every available scientist and medical officer on the ship had gathered around the sphere that Doyen had brought back from the tomb. It sat on the examination table, still glowing faintly, still pulsing with that steady heartbeat rhythm. Minji, the chief medical officer, ran her scanner over it for the 5th time. Her hands were shaking. "Captain, this is incredible. The data structure is unlike anything I've ever seen. It's not digital, not biological, not quantum. It's something else entirely. But somehow our equipment can read it." "What does it say?" Doyen asked. He had been awake for nearly 60 hours straight, but he couldn't rest. Not yet. Not until he knew his crew could decode the cure. "It's a complete medical database," Minji replied, her voice filled with wonder. "Everything about the withering plague. The molecular structure, the infection mechanism, the progression timeline, and the cure. Captain, the cure is here. It's all here." Hyejin was working at another console, translating the text portions of the data. "There's more than just medical information. There are historical records, warnings, instructions. The precursors left us a message." "What does it say?" Jiwon asked. Hyejin's face was pale as she read from her screen. "It says the withering plague is not a natural disease. The precursors created it deliberately. They released it into the galaxy millions of years ago as their final gift to younger civilizations." The room fell silent. Everyone stared at her. "A gift?" someone said. "A disease that kills billions is a gift?" "According to this, yes," Hyejin continued. "The precursors say that the withering is a test. Every species that becomes advanced enough to travel between stars will eventually encounter it. Most species fail the test. They can't find the cure because they can't enter the tombs. They can't enter the tombs because none of them have died and been revived." "But why?" Minji asked. "Why create a disease that kills so many people?" Doyen spoke up. "Because they want to teach us something. They want us to understand the value of life by experiencing death. They want us to appreciate what we have because we know we can lose it." "That's cruel," someone muttered. "Maybe," Doyen said. "But it's also true. Think about it. The Vixari Empire is one of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They've never lost a major war. They've never faced real extinction. They sent their best warriors to the tomb, and all of them died because none of them had ever truly died before. They didn't understand death, so they couldn't pass the test." He walked over to the sphere, placing his hand on its warm surface. The precursors eliminated death from their civilization. They achieved perfect immortality, and it destroyed them. They became so comfortable, so complacent that they stopped growing. They stopped evolving. They stopped living in any meaningful way. They existed, but they didn't live. "So the withering forces species to confront mortality," Jiwan said slowly. "To value life because it can end." "Exactly. And only species that have developed the ability to bring people back from death can enter the tombs and find the cure. It's a filter, a selection process." Minji returned to her analysis of the cure. "The treatment is elegant. It uses a controlled cellular death and revival process. Essentially, the infected cells are forced to die and then reconstruct themselves. The body undergoes a form of death and resurrection at the microscopic level. How long to synthesize it? Doyen asked. With this data, I can create a working prototype in 3 weeks. We'll need to test it, of course. Run trials. But if it works as described, we can begin mass production within 6 months. 6 months, Doyen repeated. He thought of all the people dying back on Earth. 6 months seemed like forever. But it was better than never. Do it. Whatever resources you need, you have them. Over the next few hours, the team continued analyzing the sphere's data. Heejin discovered more text files, more warnings from the precursors. She called Doyen to her station. Captain, you need to see this. It's a message specifically addressed to any species that successfully retrieves the cure. She displayed it on the main screen. Doyen read it silently first, then asked her to read it aloud for everyone. Heejin's voice was somber. To the species who have found this archive, congratulations. You have passed the first test. You understand death. You have members who have died and returned. You value life because you know it can end. This makes you special. This makes you dangerous. This makes you ready for what comes next. She paused, then continued. But we must warn you. The cure we have given you will save your species from the withering. But it comes with a responsibility. If you cure the disease without preserving the lesson, you will follow our path to extinction. You will eliminate death entirely. You will achieve physical perfection. And you will lose everything that makes life worth living. The message continued. We eliminated disease. We eliminated aging. We eliminated death itself. And in doing so, we eliminated growth, change, and meaning. We lived for millions of years, unchanging and eternal. We watched the universe spin around us, but we were not part of it. We were observers, not participants. Beautiful, perfect, empty. 10,000 years after achieving immortality, we realized our mistake. But by then it was too late. We had become static. Our brains no longer formed new connections. Our societies no longer evolved. Our art became repetitive. Our science stagnated. We were alive, but we were not living. Heejin's voice cracked slightly as she read the final part. Please, children of the younger races, learn from our mistake. Cure the withering. Save your people. But remember why you had to save them. Remember that life has meaning because it can end. Remember that time is precious because it is limited. Remember that love is powerful because loss is real. The medical bay was silent when she finished. Everyone seemed to be absorbing the weight of the message. So what do we do? Jiwon asked. We can't just let people die to teach them a lesson. But we also can't ignore this warning. Doyen had been thinking about this since he left the tomb. We cure the plague. We save as many lives as we can. But we also create something new. A tradition. A practice. A way to remember this lesson even after the withering is gone. What kind of tradition? Minji asked. I don't know exactly, but it needs to be something that keeps death present in our minds without actually killing people. Something that reminds us to value life. Something that prevents us from becoming like the precursors. Over the next several days, as Minji and her team worked on synthesizing the cure, Doyen spent his time drafting a proposal. He consulted with philosophers, historians, and cultural experts back on Earth via long-range communication. He studied the practices of different human cultures regarding death and remembrance. Finally, he had something. A framework. An idea that might work. He called a meeting of the senior staff. I've been working on how we preserve the precursor's lesson. Here's what I propose. We establish a new tradition for all of humanity. We call it the Day of Crossing. He displayed his proposal on the screen. Once per year, every human settlement observes a day of silence and contemplation. No work, no entertainment, no distractions. Just quiet reflection on mortality, loss, and the value of life. On this day, we remember those we've lost. We think about our own mortality. We consider what we want to accomplish with the time we have. And we renew our commitment to living meaningful lives, not just long lives. Jiwon frowned. Will people actually do this? Humans don't like thinking about death. They will if we make it mandatory, Doyen said. And more than that, they'll do it because we'll explain why it matters. Every person who receives the Phoenix Serum, the cure for the withering, will be required to complete an education program. They'll learn about the precursors. They'll learn about the tomb. They'll learn about why this matters. Phoenix Serum? Minji asked. That's what I'm proposing we call the cure. Phoenix, the bird that dies and is reborn. It seems appropriate. Hyejin nodded slowly. It's a good idea, Captain. But will Earth's government agree to it? They'll have to. The cure is useless without understanding. The precursors made that clear. If we just eliminate the withering without learning the lesson, we'll eventually make the same mistakes they did. 3 weeks later, Minji approached Doyen with a small vial of clear liquid. Captain, this is it. The first dose of Phoenix serum, it works. I tested it on tissue samples infected with the withering. Complete cure within 72 hours. Doyen held the vial up to the light. Such a small thing, such an enormous impact. Contact Earth, tell them we're coming home. And tell them we have conditions for releasing the cure. The journey back to Earth took 4 weeks. During that time, Doyen transmitted his proposal to the government. He included all the data from the tomb, all the warnings from the precursors, and his detailed plan for the Day of Crossing tradition. The response from Earth was immediate and intense. The government was desperate for the cure. The withering plague had now killed over 3 billion people and showed no signs of slowing. Entire cities had been quarantined. The economy was collapsing. Society was breaking down under the weight of so much death. But Doyen's conditions were unprecedented. No government in human history had ever mandated a day of contemplation about death. No medical treatment had ever required philosophical education before administration. The debates raged in the Earth Senate for days. Some senators argued that Doyen had no right to place conditions on releasing a cure that could save billions. Others argued that the precursor's warning was too important to ignore. Still others worried that forcing people to think about death would cause psychological harm. Doyen watched the debates from the ship, feeling the weight of his decision. Jiwon sat beside him in the observation lounge. Do you think they'll accept your terms? Jiwon asked. They have to. The alternative is extinction, just slower. Some of the senators are calling you a tyrant. They say you're holding the cure hostage. Doyen sighed. I know, but I saw what happened to the precursors. I felt it when I was in the tomb. They didn't die from war or disease or disaster. They died from comfort. They eliminated all challenges, all risks, all endings. And without endings, nothing had meaning anymore. It's hard for people to understand that, Jiwon said. Most people just want to live. They don't think about the philosophical implications. That's exactly the problem. That's why the precursors created the withering in the first place, to force us to think about these things before it's too late. Finally, after 12 days of debate, the Earth Senate reached a decision. They accepted Doyen's terms with a vote of 63 to 37. The Phoenix serum would be distributed to all infected individuals, but only after they completed a mandatory 12-hour education program. And the Day of Crossing would be established as a permanent human tradition. When the ship arrived at Earth, Doyen was treated both as a hero and a controversial figure. Millions celebrated his return. Millions more protested his conditions. But the cure was released and people began receiving treatment. The education program was intensive. People learned about the precursors in detail. They saw recordings from the tomb, translated texts, historical analyses. They learned about the species that had failed the test and why they failed. They learned about humanity's unique ability to revive the dead and what that meant for their place in the galaxy. Most importantly, they learned about the danger of eliminating death entirely. They saw simulations of what happened to the precursors, how immortality had slowly eroded their civilization from within. They studied the psychology of meaning and purpose and how both require the presence of endings and limits. Minji oversaw the distribution process from the main medical center in Seoul. She reported to Doyen regularly on the results. The cure works perfectly, she said during one of their calls. 98% cure rate within 72 hours. The remaining 2% show improvement within a week. We've treated over 50 million people so far with 0 negative side effects. And the education program? Doyen asked. Mixed reactions. Some people embrace it immediately. They understand why it's necessary. Others resist. They say we're forcing philosophy on them when they just want to be healthy. But everyone completes it because they know they won't get the cure otherwise. What about the Day of Crossing? Minji smiled slightly. That's actually going better than expected. We held the first observance last month. I was worried people would ignore it or treat it like a joke. But most people took it seriously. There were gatherings in parks, memorial services in temples and churches, quiet vigils in homes. People actually reflected on their mortality and the people they've lost. Doyen felt some of the tension leave his shoulders. That's good. That's what we need. Over the next few months, the Phoenix Serum was distributed across all of human space. Colonies on Mars, Europa, and Titan received shipments. Mining stations in the asteroid belt. Research outposts in the outer system. Everywhere humans lived, the cure arrived. The death toll from the withering plague began to drop dramatically. Within 6 months, new infections had decreased by 90%. Within a year, the plague was effectively eliminated from human space. But Doyen's work was not finished. He had one more task to complete. He requested a meeting with the Galactic Council. It was an unusual request. Humanity was a junior member of the Council, with limited voting rights and little political influence. But the Council agreed to hear him, curious about how humanity had cured the withering when so many older civilizations had failed. The Council chamber was enormous, filled with representatives from 47 different species. Some were humanoid, others completely alien in form. There were beings of energy, beings of crystal, beings that existed in multiple dimensions simultaneously. Doyen stood at the center of the chamber, a small human surrounded by the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. He was nervous, but he had faced the tomb. He had spoken with the precursors. This seemed less frightening by comparison. Members of the Council, he began. Humanity has successfully cured the withering plague. We are willing to share our knowledge with all species in the galaxy. A murmur ran through the chamber. The Vexari representative stood up, their tall form imposing even from across the room. This is impossible. The withering has no cure. Countless civilizations have searched for it. All have failed. There is a cure, Doyen said calmly, but it's not easy to obtain. You must enter one of the precursor tombs, and you can only enter if you have died and been revived. The chamber erupted in noise. Species argued with each other in dozens of languages. The council moderator, a being of pure light named Sunhee, called for order. Explain yourself, human, Sunhee said. Doyen did. He told them everything. About the tomb in the void sector. About the warning that only the dead may enter. About his own death and revival 7 years ago at Titan Colony. About the archive and the sphere of knowledge. About the precursors and their terrible fate. The withering is not a disease, he concluded. It's a test. The precursors created it to identify species that have learned to value life by experiencing death. Only species that can revive their dead have members who can enter the tombs and retrieve the cure. This is absurd, the Vexari representative said. You expect us to believe that the precursors created a plague to test us? I don't expect you to believe anything, Doyen replied. I'm simply telling you what I learned. The cure exists. The knowledge exists. But you can only access it if you have members of your species who have died and been brought back to life. A new voice spoke up. It was the representative from the Crystalline Collective, a being of living crystal named Taehyun. The Vexari do not practice medical revival. Their culture considers death to be final and sacred. They have no citizens who have died and returned. Exactly, Doyen said, and that's why they failed the test. Their warriors were brave and strong, but none of them had experienced death. The tomb rejected them. What about us? Taehyun asked. The collective is naturally immortal. We do not die unless physically destroyed, and we cannot be revived if we are. Then you cannot enter the tombs, Doyen said simply. The precursors designed the test to be impossible for certain types of species. Only those who walk the line between life and death, who can cross over and return, can pass. The chamber fell silent as the implications sank in. Dozens of species in the galaxy were locked out of the cure simply because of their biology or culture. However, Doyen continued, humanity is willing to share the cure freely with all species. We ask only one thing in return, that you establish a tradition similar to our Day of Crossing, a time to remember that life has value because it can end, a practice to prevent yourselves from becoming like the precursors. You would give us the cure? Sunhee asked. Without payment? Without political concessions? Yes. The precursor's warning applies to all species, not just humanity. If we cure the withering across the galaxy but no one learns the lesson, then we've failed the real test. The vote took 3 hours. In the end, 41 species accepted Doyen's offer. They agreed to establish their own versions of the Day of Crossing. They agreed to educate their populations about the precursors and the danger of eliminating death entirely. 6 species refused, including the Vexari. They claimed that humanity was trying to impose its values on the rest of the galaxy. 6 months after the Galactic Council meeting, Doyen stood in the memorial garden on Earth. It was a beautiful place, designed specifically for the Day of Crossing observances. Trees from every continent grew here, arranged in spiraling patterns. At the center stood a monument made of black crystal, shaped like the precursor tomb, with the warning inscribed on its surface in every human language: "Only the dead may enter." Around him, millions of people had gathered for the second annual Day of Crossing. They sat quietly on the grass, alone or in small groups. Some meditated. Some wrote in journals. Some simply stared at the sky, lost in thought. The silence was profound, broken only by the sound of wind through the trees and the occasional bird call. Yejin approached Doyen quietly, sitting down beside him on the grass. She had been promoted to Chief Cultural Officer, responsible for overseeing the Day of Crossing traditions across all human settlements. "How do you think it's going?" she asked softly. "Better than I hoped," Doyen replied. "People are taking it seriously. They're not just going through the motions." "Some are," Yejin admitted. "There are always people who resist, who think this is a waste of time. But they're the minority. Most people understand now. They've seen the data from the precursors. They know what happens when a civilization eliminates death entirely." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, watching the crowd. Doyen could see families gathered together, parents holding children explaining the meaning of the day. He could see elderly people standing by memorial plaques, remembering those they had lost. He could see young people sitting alone, perhaps confronting their own mortality for the first time. "I got a message from Minji yesterday," Hyejin said. "The last of the withering cases has been cured. The disease is officially extinct in human space." "Well, that's good news." "It is." But she said something interesting. She said that doctors have started noticing a change in how people approach medicine. They're not demanding eternal youth anymore. They're not seeking treatments to eliminate all risk. They're accepting that death is part of life. Doyen nodded. "That's the lesson taking hold. That's what the precursors wanted. Do you think we'll remember it? In 100 years? In 1,000? Will humanity still observe the Day of Crossing? Or will it become just another forgotten ritual?" "Some generations will forget," Doyen said honestly. "They'll think it's just tradition, ritual without meaning. But enough will remember. Enough will understand. We've built the knowledge into our culture now. It's in our schools, our media, our art. The story of the precursors and what happened to them. The warning that death gives life meaning." Jiwon joined them, sitting on Doyen's other side. He had been promoted to captain of his own ship, continuing humanity's exploration of the galaxy. The Galactic Council sent another message. "The species that accepted our offer have all successfully eliminated the withering from their populations. They're grateful." "And the species that refused?" Doyen asked, still struggling. "The Vexari Empire has lost billions to the plague, but they won't accept our help. Their pride won't allow it." "That's their choice," Doyen said sadly. "We offered. We can't force them to accept." "There's something else," Jiwon continued. "We've detected another tomb. This one is in the Perseus Arm, about 2,000 light years from here. It's different from the first one, bigger, more complex. The warning is different too." "What does it say?" "Only the living may enter." Doyen felt a chill run down his spine. He thought about the archive's final words to him, about how he had passed the first test. The first test? That implied there were more tests to come. "The precursors left us many tombs," he said quietly. "Each one different. Each one a test. Each one a treasure. We passed the first test. We learned that death gives life meaning. What do you think the next test is?" "I don't know," Jiwon admitted. "But whatever it is, humanity will face it. We always do." The sun began to set over the memorial garden, casting long shadows across the grass. The Day of Crossing was coming to an end. Soon people would return to their lives, their work, their daily activities. But they would carry the lesson with them. The understanding that time was precious because it was limited. That love was powerful because loss was real. That life had meaning because it could end. Hyejin stood up, preparing to give the closing speech for the day's observance. Doyen watched her walk to the central platform. Her voice carried across the garden, amplified by speakers but somehow still feeling intimate and personal. "Today we remember," she said. "We remember those we have lost. We remember that we are mortal. We remember that our time here is limited and therefore precious. We remember the precursors who forgot these truths and paid the ultimate price. But we also celebrate. We celebrate life. We celebrate the time we have. We celebrate the connections we make and the meaning we create. We celebrate our ability to face death and choose life anyway. The precursors warned us. To eliminate death entirely is to eliminate growth. To cure all endings is to lose all beginnings. To achieve perfect immortality is to embrace perfect stagnation. So we choose differently. We choose to live fully, knowing that our lives will end. We choose to love deeply, knowing that we will lose those we love. We choose to grow and change and evolve, accepting the pain that comes with transformation. This is humanity's gift to the universe, not the cure for the withering, not our technology or our ships or our weapons, but our understanding, our wisdom, our refusal to run from death, and our commitment to live meaningful lives despite it. The crowd began to disperse slowly, quietly. Families walked together through the darkening garden. Friends embraced. Strangers nodded to each other in shared understanding. Doyon remained sitting on the grass, watching it all. Minji came to find him eventually. "Captain, there's someone who wants to meet you. A representative from the Vexari Empire." Doyon stood up, surprised. "The Vexari? I thought they refused our help." "They did. But this representative is different. He's requesting asylum on Earth. He says he wants to undergo the death and revival process so he can enter the tomb and retrieve the cure for his people." "That's not how it works," Doyon said. "You can't fake death just to pass the test. It has to be real. You have to actually die and be brought back." "I know. He knows too. He's willing to risk it. He says he'll let our doctors stop his heart and then try to revive him. He understands he might not survive." Doyon thought about this, about what it meant for a Vexari warrior to request death. In their culture, death was sacred and final. To deliberately die and return would make him an outcast, rejected by his own people. But he was willing to do it anyway to save them. "Tell him I'll meet with him," Doyon said. "But he needs to understand what he's doing. This isn't just a medical procedure. It's a transformation. If he dies and comes back, he won't be the same person anymore. Death changes you." "I think he knows that, sir. I think that's why he's doing it." As Minji walked away, Doyon looked up at the stars beginning to appear in the darkening sky. Somewhere out there, 2,000 light-years away, another tomb waited. Another test. Another lesson to learn. He thought about the precursors, those ancient beings who had transcended physical form. Were they watching? Did they know that humanity had passed their first test? Were they pleased? Disappointed? Indifferent? He would probably never know. But he knew this. Humanity had been given a gift. Not just the cure for the withering, but the wisdom to use it correctly. The understanding that death was not the enemy. That endings gave meaning to beginnings. That mortality made life precious. "Thank you," he said quietly to the stars, to the precursors, to whatever might be listening. "Thank you for the warning. Thank you for the test. Thank you for believing we could pass it." The wind picked up, rustling through the trees of the memorial garden. For just a moment, Doyon felt that presence again, the vast ancient consciousness he had encountered in the tomb. It didn't speak, but he felt its acknowledgement, its approval, its hope for humanity's future. Then it was gone, and he was alone under the stars. But he wasn't really alone. 47 crew members had trusted him enough to follow him to the tomb. Billions of humans had accepted his conditions and learned the precursors' lesson. 41 alien species had joined them in establishing their own days of crossing. And now one Vexari warrior was willing to die and return to save his people. The lesson was spreading. The wisdom was taking root. Humanity, and the galaxy beyond, was learning to value life by understanding death. And somewhere in the impossible distance, another tomb waited with another test. When humanity was ready, they would face it. And whatever that test required, whatever lesson it taught, they would learn it. Because that was what humans did. They faced the impossible. They died and returned. They learned and grew and adapted. They chose meaning over comfort. They chose life fully and completely, with all its pain and joy and temporary beauty. Captain Doyon, the man who had died in the void and returned, smiled at the stars. Humanity was ready for whatever came next.